Nobody warned me my friends would quietly disappear after I retired. Before I get into it, if this is the kind of honest talk you have been looking for, do an old man a favor and subscribe. It keeps these conversations going. I thought I knew what retirement would cost me. I really did. I braced myself for the things everyone warns you about. Missing the work, missing the purpose, that steady rhythm of a busy day, the alarm, the commute, the feeling that somebody somewhere was waiting on me to show up. I packed all that up in my head and told myself I was ready to lose it. What I never braced for was the phone. Nobody tells you about the phone. The way it just sits there on the kitchen counter and goes quiet. No calls, no little buzz on a Tuesday. Just silence where 30 years of voices used to be. Let me tell you about those voices. There was Dave, 2 cubicles over, 40 years. I sat near that man. There was the morning coffee crew, the ones who knew I took it black, no sugar, without ever asking. There were the Friday guys, the ones you grab a beer with because the week is finally done and you earned it. 30, 40 years, next to the same faces, day after day after day. You think that is friendship? Of course you do. How could it be anything else? My last Friday, they threw me a little cake in the break room. One of those sheet cakes with my name spelled out in blue frosting, plastic forks, the whole thing, handshakes all around, a card everybody signed, and the promises, we'll golf. Well, before I tell you about that first call I made to Tom, let me say this quick. If you're still here with me, nodding along, feeling seen, that's exactly who this channel is for. I'm not here to sell you anything, just honest talk about the stuff nobody warned us about. So do this old man a favor, hit like and subscribe. It's how these conversations keep going and how you'll catch the next one. Anyway, back to Tom and the phone call that started rebuilding everything. Grab lunch. We'll stay in touch, you old goat. Don't be a stranger. And here is the honest part. I believed every single word of it. So did they, I think. Nobody was lying that afternoon. We meant it, standing there, with cake on paper plates. Then the first month passed and the calls got shorter. You could feel it. A little quicker to hang up, a little harder to find something to say. By the 3rd month, there were no calls at all. Not one. I would sit there some evenings with the phone in my hand, thumb over a name, and just put it back down, waiting for them to call first. They were probably doing the same, and it was not a fight. Understand that. There was no argument, no falling out. Nobody did anything wrong. They just drifted, the way a boat drifts once you finally untie the rope. Slow. Quiet. You look up one morning, and the dock is a long way off, and you never even saw it start to move. If your phone has gotten quieter since your last day of work, you already know exactly where this is going. I remember the morning it landed on me. I was standing in my kitchen. 10 in the morning, coffee going cold, in my hand, the house so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. And it hit me plain, no drama to it. The thread that held us together was the building, not the bond. It was the parking lot, and the fluorescent lights, and the same 8:30 meeting. Take that away, and there was nothing underneath to hold on to. I stood there a while with that, cup in my hand, gone lukewarm, then cold. 40 years of good mornings and inside jokes, and have a good weekend, and none of it, it turned out, had my name on it. It had the company's name on it. I want to be honest with you about how that felt. It stung. It stung more than losing the job ever did. The job I knew was ending. I signed up for that. But the friends, I thought those were mine to keep. I thought I was carrying them with me out the door, and I wasn't. Now, if I stopped there, this would just be a sad story about a lonely old man and his cold coffee, and plenty of folks would nod along, feel a little worse, and move on. But that sting, as real as it was, wasn't the real wound. It took me a long time to see that, longer than I'd like to admit, because underneath the hurt there was a harder truth waiting. And once I finally let myself look at it, it moved me from bitter to something better, to honest. It was never that they abandoned me. That is the part that took me the longest to see. It was that we never really chose each other in the first place. We were assigned to each other by a parking lot and a paycheck. And when that ended, so did the reason to try. Let that sit for a second, because it is heavier than it sounds. 40 years. 40 years I called those men my friends. And when I am honest with myself, 40 years of friendship was really 40 years of standing in the same building at the same hours, drinking the same burnt coffee out of the same machine. That is not nothing. But it is not what I told myself it was either. It was proximity, wearing the costume of a bond. And I never once questioned the costume, because I never had a reason to. For a while, that made me bitter. I will not pretend otherwise. These were the men I gave my Fridays to. Every Friday, for the better part of 30 years. A cold beer, the same tired jokes about the boss, the feeling that the week was finally done. And then a last handshake, a card everyone signed, and silence. No call, no text. Gone, like I had done something wrong, when all I had done was stop showing up to a building. I sat with that bitterness longer than I should have. Some mornings I would look at the phone that used to ring and feel something close to anger. How do you give a man 3 decades of Friday nights and get nothing back but quiet? But bitterness is a poor place to live. And here is the turn. For a while that made me bitter. Then it made me honest. Slowly, the anger burned down into a question I had never once had the time to ask in 40 working years. Not who is convenient, who is real. That question is not a comfortable one. I will warn you now, because the moment you ask it honestly, you have to admit how much of your whole social life was an accident, a seating chart, a shift schedule. You start counting the people you would actually pick on purpose if no building forced you together. And for me, that number was smaller than my pride wanted it to be. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one morning, looking at a calendar with nothing written in it, empty square after empty square. And it struck me that the phone on the counter had not made a sound in weeks, not one ring. 40 years of co-workers, and the quiet was total. That silence asks you a question, whether you want it to or not. If you are a few months or a few years into this, tell me in the comments. How many friends quietly faded when your routine did? I would bet more of you nod than would ever admit it out loud. So ask yourself the question I finally asked. Not who is convenient, who is real. Sit with the answer, even if it stings. Mine did. But here is where something shifted for me. If those old friendships faded because the reason behind them disappeared, the parking lot, the paycheck, the shared clock, then the opposite had to be true too. A friendship built on a reason you actually chose could hold. Nobody was going to hand it to me. But nobody was stopping me from building it either. And that, strangely, felt less like grief and more like a door. That is when I stopped waiting. I had spent months waiting for the old crowd to remember me, to pick up the phone, to make good on all those promises to golf and grab lunch. They were not going to. And the truth is, deep down, I did not really want them to. I wanted something realer than that. So one quiet morning, coffee going cold beside me, I picked up the phone myself. There was one name I had been circling for a long time, a good man named Tom. Someone I had let slip for 10 years for no real reason at all. No fight, no falling out, just life and busyness and the lazy assumption that there would always be more time. My thumb hovered over his name. I did not even know what I would say. 10 years is a long silence to break. My heart was going faster than it had any right to over one phone call, and I sat there at the kitchen table, holding that phone, about to do the one thing I had put off for a decade. Because that call, though I did not know it yet, was where everything started to turn. So I called Tom, a man I had let slide for a whole decade for no good reason at all. And I sat there with the phone against my ear, not knowing what on earth I was going to say. He picked up on the third ring. And here's the funny thing. There was no awkward stretch, no fumbling for words. He said my name like he had been half expecting the call for years, and just like that, 10 years fell away. We talked for 2 hours, 2 hours, about nothing important and about everything. His knee replacement, my garden that never quite behaves, the buddy we both lost back in '99. I hung up and just sat in the quiet for a minute, a little stunned, because it proved something to me right there. A real bond does not need a building to hold it up. Tom and I never shared a cubicle, never punched the same clock. And yet, 10 years of silence could not touch it. That was the first crack of light. The thread between us was never the parking lot. It was just us. So I started saying yes. There was a neighbor of mine, an easy, patient man who kept inviting me to walk at dawn. For months I had waved him off. Too early, too cold, maybe next week. The truth is, I was just used to being alone in my own head with cold coffee at 10 in the morning, and it had started to feel normal. One morning, I finally said yes. Laced up my shoes in the dark, met him at the corner, and we walked. The sun came up over the field at the end of the road, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a long time. We walk most mornings now, not because a commute throws us together, because I choose it, because he does. And there is a difference in a friendship you actually pick that you can feel in your bones. Somewhere in there, my whole posture changed. I stopped sitting by that quiet phone, waiting for the old crowd to remember I existed, waiting to be chosen. It is a small, sour thing, that waiting, and it will hollow you out if you let it. So I quit. I stopped keeping score. I stopped counting who had not called. And instead, I started being the friend I had spent years wishing somebody would be to me. The one who reaches out first. The one who remembers the birthday. Who says, "Come over for coffee." Who picks up the phone just to say I was thinking about you. And slowly, quietly, a circle started to form again. A smaller one. Fewer people, but every one of them chosen. Not assigned to me by a schedule. Not there out of habit. Chosen, on purpose, both ways. Tom, the neighbor. A couple more that grew out of those. I would trade a whole break room full of coffee friends for those few. And I would not think twice. So here is what all of it finally taught me. Plainly, the thing I wish somebody had told me on my last Friday. Most of what we call friendship in our working years is really just proximity. That is the hard little truth of it. Dave 2 cubicles over, the Friday beer crew, the folks who knew you took it black, no sugar. A lot of that was never a bond. It was a parking lot and a paycheck, putting the same faces in front of you day after day for 40 years. And there is no shame in that. None. It carried you through a lot of long weeks. But when the routine that held it together finally disappears, you're not just losing something. You're being handed something rare. A clean slate. A chance most people never get and never even notice. The chance to build connection on purpose instead of by accident. If your phone has gone quiet since the last day of work, and you are sitting there wondering if it is too late to have real people around you again, hear me. It is not too late. I need you to actually let that land. It is not too late. I am living proof. The best friendships of my life came after the ones I thought I could not live without. After the cake in the break room, after the promises to golf that nobody kept, after the calls that got shorter and then stopped. On the other side of all that quiet, a fuller life was waiting. I just had to be brave enough to reach for it. And that is the whole thing, really. It does not take much. It is not some grand plan. It is one call. Somewhere in your phone right now is a name you have let slide for no good reason. You know the one. That is your first call, so make it. Do not wait for the perfect words, because there are no perfect words. There is just you and them and a silence that has gone on long enough. You just have to be brave enough to make the first call.